gone ahead and opened up Blender, and this is the first thing you're going to see. This is what the default Blender interface looks like the first time you launch it, or when the first time you open up the application. And one of the things that I really like about working with Blender is that they give you some presets on how you want your interface to perform, and kind of leads you to a specific task. Now, if you look specifically at the top here, we have a whole bunch of different tabs here that bring certain tools and workflows to the surface. So these little presets are going to filter the entire interface to highlight a specific workflow. Now, I know we're going to be doing a lot of sculpting inside of Blender, but don't hit this button yet. You're more than welcome to go check it out on your own time. But for today and for our first moments, we're going to work inside the General tab, which is basically going to leave all these tabs where they are. And there's a lot of them in here. There's the Modeling tab, there's the Sculpting tab, so you always get access to the Sculpting tool, UV Editing. I'll let you cruise through and check out all of this stuff on your own. For today and for most of the stuff that we're going to be doing inside this class, we're going to be hanging out in the Modeling tab. Now, there's not a huge amount of difference between the Layout tab and the Modeling tab. If you notice very carefully in the Layout tab, it includes a timeline down here below. But other than that, it's basically identical from one to the other. So let me give you a real quick small tour of the Blender interface. It's pretty straightforward. The first thing that I want to talk about is this wonderful central viewport, because this viewport is where we're going to be doing the lion's share of all of our work inside of Blender. And of course, every Blender scene is going to come with this default cube. We're going to delete that here in a minute, but get used to seeing this cube. It's a good little starting point for all of our projects. So how do we work inside of Blender? How do we orbit and pan and zoom around inside of this interface? Well, Blender requires a 3-button mouse, and specifically that middle mouse button is going to be the toggle for our orbit and our orbit. So if I hold down the middle mouse button and then move my mouse, you can see that I'm performing an orbit. The cube is staying where it originally resides in the scene itself, and we, like an astronaut floating around a space station, can orbit around and look at this cube from any number of angles. If we add the Shift key with the middle mouse button, now we can do a pan, so we're moving it up, down, and left and right, which is pretty cool. And then lastly, Control middle mouse button is going to allow us to zoom in and out, which is pretty cool. So the middle mouse button by itself will do an orbit, middle mouse button Shift will do the pan, left, right, up, and down, and then Control middle mouse button is going to allow you to zoom in and out. Now, I do a lot of my 3D work with a pen tablet, mostly for accuracy, and I'm getting a little carpal tunnel these days, so the pen tablet is really great for my ergonomics. So I don't really have access to that third button all the time. Actually, I have a mouse sitting in front of me at the moment, but let me show you one preference that I would encourage you to explore as you customize your Blender experience. So it's in the Edit pull-down menu, and this is the Global Application Preferences, and specifically where we're going here is in this Input tab. Now there's a lot of preferences, and I would encourage you to start going through all of these and customizing the Blender experience to make it work for you. What I'm going to do is jump over into the Input tab, which is going to bring a very important option to the surface, which is this Emulate 3-button mouse. I'm going to turn that on, which is going to allow me to work with the pen tablet a little bit more directly. Okay, so let me close down my preferences, and now I get to hold down the Alt key to do the pan. Alt Shift is going to allow me to do the pan. Excuse me, just the Alt key by itself is the orbit. Alt Shift is the pan, and then Alt Control is going to be the zoom in and out. So that's a really great preference change if you're working on a graphics tablet, a pen tablet like I am. In addition, I would also encourage you to go into the navigation section and look at this zoom method. I've noticed that a lot of folks they like to customize how they're zooming, if they're zooming in or out based on if they're moving their mouse left or right or up and down. So definitely explore this. Some people like to invert it. All that stuff is right here at our fingertips inside the global application preferences. Okay. So now that we have a little bit more comfort with how we're going to work inside the interface itself, let's talk about the rest of the interface. And there's a lot going on in here. Now, probably the second most important part inside the Blender interface is this little drop-down menu right over here. This drop-down menu is going to change our modes. Now, the default mode in the Modeling tab is the Edit mode. And as one might imagine, this is how we can go in. We can select verts. We can move them around, what have you. This is where we edit the components inside of our meshes. So the verts, the edges, and of course, last but certainly not least, the faces as well. But it's not the only mode, and I want you to remember this because whatever mode you're in is going to determine which tools you have access to in your toolbar. So I'm in the edit mode, and of course I got my transform tools up here. These are my component editing tools down over here, and then some sub D and some smoothing tools down at the bottom. However, if I go into object mode, now check it out. Those tools are changed. And as we know, like in working in Maya and other 3D application, objects are gigantic containers. So now we're not working and editing with the individual components of that container. We're referencing and we're manipulating the entire container. So now our transform tool is going to allow us to move that entire object. So this menu right here is going to change your toolbar. Here's all the sculpting tools, the vertex painting tools, the weight tools. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see pretty quickly that our tools are going to change. Here's Pat's Power User Shortcut of the day, and it's the Tab key. The Tab key is going to allow us to cycle between Edit mode and Object mode, and that's a great little trick because those are the two modes, especially when blocking out simple shapes, that we're going to be going in and out of probably the most often. Edit mode and then object mode, which is pretty cool. Okay, let's keep cruising here. Now, we also have some pull-down menus at the top. Don't overlook these because these are going to give you the complete list of tools and what's available to us inside of this particular mode. Of course, we have the object pull-down menu, and you can see that there's a lot in here. These menus in here are more than just simple little secondary menus. They actually contain a majority of the tools and the operators inside the application. Now check it out. If you go into edit mode, those menus then expand a little bit to give you even more editing tools. Like there's a lot of edge tools that you're going to be working with in here that are not in these. These are kind of like the all-stars. These are the tools that we use the most often, but there's a lot of tools in here as well. So be mindful of these menus. We're going to be going in and out of these often. As we keep going through our little tour here, the upper right-hand corner of our viewport, these are all options that are going to change how the viewport is going to be drawn. And we're not going to go through all of them. There are a lot in here, and I would definitely encourage you to check it out. There's some good things in here, especially this little drop-down menu. This drop-down menu will change all the different objects that are going to be drawn inside the scene itself. Like, for example, maybe you don't want to see the grid. You can turn that on and off. Some folks don't like seeing the axes. I mean, you can customize your viewport to give you an experience that's going to help you be more creative, and these tools in here are going to help you out. Of course, we got our standard 3D compass as well. This is going to help us keep our bearings inside our true three-dimensional space. The big difference between Blender and other 3D apps is that we are a Z-up environment. This is a right-hand Cartesian grid system. And if you go back into good old 10th grade geometry class, we plotted points along a two-dimensional grid, the X and, of course, the Y axis as well. Actually, the Y axis is the vertical one going up and down. Now, when we add that third one in, the third one is then the depth, the Z axis that goes up and down. In other apps like Maya or Unreal or Unity, the Y axis is the vertical axis, but here instead of Blender, the Z axis is the vertical. So keep that in mind. It's not too big of a deal. Don't let that don't get hung up on the Z up, Y up world. It's pretty easy once you just kind of remember that it's up, down, left, right, forward, and backwards, and the colors are just there to help you kind of keep your bearings. Now, one of the things that I do like about this compass very directly is that it's going to tell you the positive areas of the axes with these little badges, which is pretty cool. So if you look carefully here, as I hover over each one of them, yeah, I can look at the negative Y side, which is pretty cool. There's the positive X, positive Y. So this is a great way of understanding the front the top, things like that. So that's going to help you out as well. Of course, you can zoom in, pan. This is going to allow you to look through the render camera. And then last but not least, this is going to remove the perspective and change it into a orthographic viewport, which is pretty cool. So you got some options in here. Customize it, play around with it. There is no wrong way of working inside of Blender or any 3D app for that matter. Just make it easier for you and your creative process to make the shapes. Okay, lastly, real fast here, we have two other important areas in the Blender interface. This is our outliner, our list of all of the objects that are currently inside of our scene itself. They're organized into these folders called collections, and you can create as many collections as you want and organize this pretty quickly, which is pretty neat. Of course, it comes with a camera, a light, and of course this default cube. If you don't want to work with this default cube, I'm going to show you a trick here real fast. The application-wide keyboard shortcut for deleting something is the X key. So if you hit the X key, delete, bye-bye, and it's gone. So the X key, X is an X-ray or xylophone. That's the global keyboard shortcut for deleting something. Don't hit the delete key on the keyboard. You have to hit the X key. Now, right below the outliner is a whole series of very important objects. And I'm going to add in a mesh object again here real fast. That way it gets populated with something. Let's do a 3D object, Pat, not a, let's do the good old Blender monkey. There we go. Okay, so with this object in this scene here, now we can start to see all these different properties. This is the properties panel, and there's a bunch of them. I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are where you're going to go to find some granular details on the objects or the scene inside of Blender itself. The gray ones, these are kind of scene items in here. This one's going to be your render settings. This is your output settings. I mean, these are all kind of the global scene properties. And all the ones that have colors on them down below, these are specific to a specific object inside the scene itself. And we're going to be going in and out of these often. The ones that you'll definitely want to make sure you keep an eye on is this orange cube. This is all of the object properties. So you can see here all the object transform channels for good old Suzanne. If we change the location, you can see that it moves that object inside of our three-dimensional space in here. So the properties panel is going to give you access to a lot of granular details that will help you continue to craft and to edit all of your shapes inside of Blender. Now there's a lot going on inside the Blender interface. This is just a basic overview. And then over the next couple of weeks, you're going to get more and more familiar with working inside of this application. I think you're going to find that's pretty great and it's very easy to use.